first started this project, the idea was to put the 2008 chassis underneath the 73 body. After doing measurements, pulling everything apart and looking at it, we realized that we needed to shorten the frame by 4 inches to get our wheelbase right. And then we set the cab on and got our measurements for our body mount locations. Initially, I had pulled this cross member out because I was going to use the factory location on the cab, and I got halfway through that and had that cross member cut into a bunch of pieces and realized that my gas tank needed that cross member. So then I spent an entire day putting that back together. So anyway, so once we got the frame shortened and we had the right wheelbase, mind you, we did this all with the axles and with suspension and everything on here, so that we could keep the measurements straight and everything like that. Once we got the frame shortened and I got it tacked together, which I just left it tacked together for up until just the other day, just in case I needed to stretch it again, shorten it a little bit more, half inch or an inch here or there. Once we got that done, then I started the cab mounts. I did the cross member mess up, got that took care of. Once I did that, then I got to looking and realized that I needed to move the cab mount, so I had to cut and drill new spots for our new cab mounts to relocate them to the outside of the frame, so it would clear our fuel tank. It'll actually, in the long run, it'll give it a more stable ride being set up like that anyways. It'll feel more sturdy when you're cornering, pulling trailers, stuff like that. Well, when I did that, all my measurements came off of, because I knew the bed was going to fit where it was supposed to fit. So all the measurements I took to get the cab where I wanted it was based on where the bed sit. I didn't have the bed on here, but I knew what my measurements were between the bed mounting hole and my cab mounting holes. So I did all my measurements moving forward from where the bed was located at. That way, once we got done, we'd know that the bed would fit, the cab would fit. And so we worked basically from the middle forward, and I got the back ones set where I wanted them and got my measurements right, and then I set my middle ones to match the back ones. And once I did that, then we got to the front of the frame and we realized that, obviously we knew this from fitting the cab, that the frame horns were not going to work where they were at. So we had to chop the frame horns and rebuild the front frame horns to match the 73 Ford rather than the 08 Ford. In the process of doing that, in order to get our body mounts, our core support mounts where they needed to be, and also to fit our radiator and our intercooler, I had to completely build an entire new core support. So I spent a good bit of time taking the old core support and chopping it up and redoing it so that we could fit our intercooler, our radiator, our AC condenser, and also have a new spot for our core support cab mounts.
Started to rain, so hard he couldn't even see the passing lane. Well, it started down grade when he lost a gear. He reached for the brakes, found he had no air. The Montego grade is steep and long, and everybody that seen him thought the bandit was gone. But listen, well, his truck jackknife turned completely around. He was coming down back about the speed of sound. A lot of folks seen him, and they all say he had his head out the window, yelling clear the way. Well, he got to the bottom, safe and sound. Everybody asked Bandit how he made it down. He said, folks, when the truck picked up too much speed, I just run along beside it and drug my feet. You heard the legend of Jesse James and John Henry, just to mention some names. Well, there's a truck driving legend in the South today, a man called Bandit from Atlanta.
Also, in the process of doing that, we gave ourselves more tire clearance. So if we want to run big old huge tires and still be able to turn it, we don't have nothing in the way now. So once I got the core support done, measured and made sure that the intercooler fit, the radiator fit, then once we did that, we had all the cab mounts. And mind you, when I did all this, I had all the cab mounts tacked on. I had the frame still tacked together. I didn't finish weld anything at this point until I knew 100% for sure that everything was going to fit the way it was supposed to. So got the core support built, put the radiator, intercooler in there, and then we set the motor and transmission so that we could set the cab and make sure that everything fit the way it was supposed to, and put the motor where it needed to be. And then I went to building the motor mount brackets, which was a huge pain in the ass. It took me 2.5 days to build them bastards. I don't ever want to do that again.
I'm from outer space, I got Milky Way for blood, evolution in my veins. I'm gone, I've been far away, I'm illuminated now, make a move, start the waves. I've been dreaming about flying for a long time. I had a vision from the birds, they want a coastline. Artificially intelligent way, I'm your future, past and present, I'm a fine line. Yeah, I'm the missing link of this illusion. I am not really here, I'm an intrusion. I don't swim or sink, I just flow. I don't need gravity, I just need room. When I move, it's in a quick rumble. I won't ever fall, never stumble.
They look good, and the motor sits where it's supposed to. Initially, we were going to run a mechanical fan on this thing rather than electric fans. But in order for the motor to sit in there like it's supposed to, and radiators and everything else like that, the mechanical fan is too far. It's too far down under the radiator in order for it to work. So it's either build a special radiator fan bearing built so to move the fan up, or just use electric fans. So we're going to end up using electric fan. A set of fans in a shroud that mounts your factory Dodge overflow bottle and your windshield washer bottle, and it's kind of heat and stuff like that. And low speeds, electric fans will do you better anyway for AC and stuff like that. The big thing behind this truck, and what I really want to do with it, is I want every single part on this truck to be readily available and replaceable. So we used Ford motor mounts. It fit better that way than to try to use the Dodge ones. We're using Ford factory suspension parts other than the lift kit. Body mounts are factory 08 Ford body mounts.
But the lift kit is still for a 2008 Ford, right?
Yes. Yeah, lift kit is for a 2008 Ford. Radiators for a 96 Dodge, intercoolers for a 96 Dodge. All the parts in there are going to be the same. It's either going to be 08 Ford or 96 Dodge as far as mechanical goes. As far as all the drivetrain, clutch, transmission, all that stuff is going to be readily available and easy to replace. So if somebody gets this truck and wants to drive across country and has an issue, it's fixable without having to wait weeks for custom parts to be built. As far as phase one goes, we got the whole frame done. After I got everything measured up, everything 100%, I knew for sure everything was going to fit exactly like I wanted it to. Then I went and finish welded everything. In the last couple days, I finish welded everything where it's at so that we can get it off the powder coat. The only other thing I had to do is once I got the brackets, motor mounts, and everything like that set, I did have to move the transmission cross member back about 3/4 of an inch. It still fit, but the transmission mount was slid all the way to the back of the cross member, and I didn't really like that. And we got the cab motor done, got the cab put back on there, and then we set the bed for the first time, and the bed fit perfect, but these frames on the 08 Fords have a bit of a slope to the back, whereas the 73 Ford doesn't. So the bed fit, but it was leaning to the back a little bit, so I had to adjust the frame so that the bed would sit up level with the cab. And to do that, I just put in some spacers to match what the bed needed in order to sit level. So we got everything set and welded and cleaned up. We found out that our coil buckets were junk once we finished pulling the suspension apart. I knew they weren't in very good shape, but I didn't realize they was in as bad a shape as we thought. So we pulled the coil buckets off, and we're gonna get new coil buckets. We got them coming already. We'll get the frame powder coated, then we'll get the coil buckets powder coated, and we'll put them back on. I prefer to have it powder coated under the coil buckets anyway, so it won't rust in the future.
And you're going to blow apart the diffs and everything so they get powder coated as well? Sandblasted and powder coated?
Diffs, the steering knuckles, all that's going to get powder coated. I'm going to blow those apart this weekend so that we can send that off to powder coat too. And then we've got all new parts for for front and rear. We got bearings, we got ball joints, we got steering parts, track bars, everything in this truck is going to be new, except the rear leaf springs, because why I changed those, there's nothing wrong with them. But anyway, so initially I just stuck, I mean, if you watch videos, previous videos, initially I had a 3x6 square tubing that was only 1/8 inch thick. And so initially, just so I could get my measurements and get things moving in the right direction, I stuck those in there and welded them up like my frame horns, like they're like what was going to be there, because I didn't know how far down I needed to notch it or any of that stuff. So I wanted to just put something in there so I could measure, so I could have something to go off of. Once I got the core support built and got the radiator and intercooler and everything in the core support, then I set it back down on the cab mounts and started doing some measuring and figuring out, and I had to notch 3 inches down into my 2x6, and then I took out 1 inch out of the top of it. Once I got it all notched, obviously I wasn't going to leave 1/8 inch square tubing in there as a frame, so we went with, once I got everything notched where I wanted it, then I went and plated it all with 3/16 flat plate, cut and bent and massaged it all, welded it in there so that it looked good. And then once I got it all done, I left the bottom undone until just today, because I don't want to weld underneath. Like, I don't lay on my back and weld if I don't have to. So then on the bottom, it's actually, to make it just a little bit more rigid, it's actually 1/4 inch on the bottom. But if anybody wants to, you know, in the future, if somebody wants to put a winch on this thing, or a big old heavy bumper, or massive tow hooks or whatever, it's got more than enough strength to handle it. So everything I've done so far is cut and torch, a grinder, and a welder. Right? We don't have. I've probably gone through 150 grinding discs so far to get everything right. But the big thing, yeah, is just it's all basic tools that anybody could use to do the same thing. It just takes a little bit of time and a little bit of thought, and you can do pretty much anything you want with a welder and a grinder.
And some patience.
And a lot of thought, because the big thing is when you go through all the work to make something like this, and you spend hours and hours and hours cutting and grinding and fitting and everything like that, just to find out that it's not going to work. There's nothing more irritating than wasting a day of time putting all your time into something that you have to chuck in the scrap bin.
Oh, we all think that Chris is some miracle worker, but guess what? He screwed up. See this? Cross member, he cut it out, and then later realized that we have to have it for the fuel tank. So he had the fun, joyous time of welding it all back up. But that's what happens. You have to be 10 steps ahead, because if you are ever miss anything like that, then you have to backtrack. Shit happens, but he fixed it.
So you always gotta be thinking at least 10 or 15 steps ahead. Always. Like, as far as the frame horns, I mean, you gotta think about every last aspect: the core support, the radiator, if the shroud's gonna fit, how the bumper's gonna fit, your body mounts. Like, there's 15, 20 different things that have to be thought about on the course or on the frame horns. And if any one of those is not thought about and you build them, then guaranteed something's not going to fit. Something. So you got to constantly be thinking about every single last aspect, all the way up to the finished truck, all the way completely up to the complete finished truck. Every single aspect of what's got to be done from day one. Otherwise, you'll miss something, like I did with the cross member and the gas tank. You'll miss something, and it will piss you clean off and discourage you and make you not want to do projects like this. When this comes back from powder coating, it's probably just going to sit somewhere for a while we work on the cab. Because we got a whole lot. So far, the only thing, the big thing so far for this first phase is to get the chassis ready and off the powder coat. The chassis is ready now. It's 100% ready to go. There's nothing else I need to do to it. I've got holes I got my bumper brackets built. I've got my bumper brackets for the back. Cross member holes are drilled. Everything's ready to go. Once this comes back from powder coat, we can actually start building the chassis up but it will be a little while still before we put the cab on it. But we'll be able to get motor, transmissions, lift kit, axles put together, steering built. Like I said, all new parts, new steering box, new everything. But once it comes back from powder coat, or while it's at powder coat, we're going to start working on the cab. The cab needs a good little bit of work. For one, we got to pull apart the whole front now that the core support's built and everything's fit. We got to pull the core support out and paint it, clean it up and paint it. We got to pull fenders off. I want to get all the inside of the fenders cleaned up and repainted. So this whole truck is going to be 100% completely redone, except for the outer shell, except for the exterior paint, because we really like the way it looks, and the whole point is to have it more like an old farm truck that's not old anymore. That's our plan right now, is to leave the outside, but everything on the inside is going to be redone. So we're going to paint the underneath of the cab, we're going to paint the firewall, we're going to paint the inside of the fenders, we'll rebuild the inner fenders, and then repaint the inside of the cab. The whole inside of the cab is going to be done, new carpet, King Ranch, heated cooled seats, AC, cruise control. It's going to have everything you could possibly want in a new truck as far as 2008 goes, you know. And then the outside is going to look just like it looks right now. We'll get the windows tinted, you know, make it look good, but make it look old. And that's going to be, and there's a couple small rust spots that need to be fixed, but all in all, this truck is in really good shape. The floorboards are rusty, but they're not, it's more surface rust. They're not rusted through or anything like that, but we're going to clean them up and see. If it seems like they might be a little rough once we clean them up, then we'll replace the floorboards. But as of right now, I think they just need cleaned up. As far as I can tell, we got a hole right there in the corner of the door jamb right there, and then on the other side we have a hole in the same place. Other than that, I'm not seeing haven't seen a whole lot of holes, rust, or issues such as that. It's one thing that's nice when you take a two-wheel drive truck to do this with, because very rarely do two-wheel drive trucks, very rarely are they in a position where they see a lot of road salt and stuff like that. They usually sit in the carport somewhere during the winter and then come out in the summer. So when you find two-wheel drive trucks and turn them into stuff like this, it's kind of nice because they're usually not in too bad a shape rust-wise.
Yep, this is a two-wheel drive camper special.
Also, when we do the cab, it's going to have modern master cylinder, modern hydro boost. It's going to have hydraulic clutch assembly. I'm going to actually retrofit the parts out of the 08 cab, the pedals and master cylinder and clutch master cylinder. I'm going to retrofit all that from that cab into this firewall. Because again, readily available parts. You can go to any parts store anywhere in the country and get a master cylinder if you need it for a 2008 Ford right now. You can get any part you need for those trucks. So the whole point is to have something that's actually drivable and not something that has to sit in your garage and never be used. It's also going to have a cool stereo system.